Hello again, welcome back everyone. Liquorhound here with you. Thank you for joining me once again for another spirit review video. And today I'll be taking a look at the Murray Hill Club Special Release number 2. This is coming to us from the Joseph Magnus Distillery there in Washington, D.C. Retail pricing on this special release is going to be $150, bottled at 112 proof. There are only 700 of these to go around, and it was finished in a very, very special cask. Now, when I say special cask, when you think of bourbon or whiskeys being finished in cask, typically you see, sherry, Oloroso, sometimes some PX, maybe some port, and every now and then a cognac cask. But never had I ever heard of a Pineau Des Charentes cask being used in the finishing process, and that's what we have here. Matter of fact, the very first special release of this Murray Hill Club was also in a Pineau Des Charentes cask. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that, no big deal. It's not very popular here in the U.S. We don't actually get very much of it. But Pineau Des Charentes is usually found as a French aperitif. It's made during the cognac, when they're about to start distilling cognac is usually, I guess, when it's made. And what they'll do is they'll take unfiltered grape juice, which is, again, they're crushing the grapes to make the juice to go into the cognac still, which is going to be turned into eau de vie, which is their white spirit, that goes into the European oak cask to create cognac. Well, what they'll do is they'll take some of that unfiltered grape juice, add in some of that fresh eau de vie, bring it to about 17-19% ABV, put that in a cask, and let that sit for about 3 to 20-ish years, somewhere in there. When it comes out, it's just really, especially when it's older, that's when to me it was better at about, I had a 15-year-old that was really, really great. But it's really rich and condensed like a fortified wine, but a little more vibrant, a little more of the juice element, honey type, like an apple cider, grape juice, honey type richness to it. And of course the oaks adding complexity as well. Anyway, so they take that Pineau Des Charentes cask, which can be made from white or red grapes. And in this case, it was definitely a red grape varietal, as you can tell by that color. And I was lucky enough to get to be able to speak with Nancy Fraley. Now, Nancy Fraley is the master blender. She goes around to different distilleries, works with Magnus a lot on their special releases, and she was kind of the one, I guess, had the idea of the Pineau Des Charentes cask and was monitoring this the whole way, because she was telling me she was really worried about it becoming too sweet due to that cask. But I think she did a great job, because that definitely is not the case here. It is sweet, but it's just perfectly balanced. But let's go ahead and get to the nosing on this whiskey here. And you know what? Before we do that, talk about what exactly goes into this. When she and I were talking, she was also telling me about the bourbons that went into it. Now, Murray Hill Club is a blended bourbon, which means there's a little bit of a light whiskey component to it. So she was telling me they source a 12 and a 20-year-old MGP bourbon, both with the recipe of 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. They added to those two a little bit of that 10-year-old light whiskey. And she was telling me it only made up about 10, maybe 15% of the composition. So it is just a little bit there. Again, light whiskey is basically can be made from the exact same mash bill or recipe as a bourbon. It just gets distilled to 160 and up. Usually 160, 180-ish, somewhere like that. Anyway, so they took some of that, blended those 3 bourbons together, let them marry a little bit, and then put them in the Pineau Des Charentes cask, she said, for 9 months when it came out. Okay, so let's get to it now, the nosing. First thing I notice on it, it's very deep. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of dark elements like oak resin, there's cocoa powder, there's dark stone fruit type thing going on. So when I nose it, I get not just, typically you'll find a lot of caramel, vanilla type aspects to bourbon. Here I'm getting a little brown sugar, but more of a sorghum molasses type nose to it. There's a mixed berry element to it, but they're not vibrant. It's almost like to me, if you reduced them down, if you made a compote where you took the berries, put them in a pan and kind of added some sugar and just reduced them down, softened them up. And that's kind of what I'm getting here. A little bit of an orange oil element. Very kind of reminiscent to me of the original cigar blend, which was fantastic in my opinion. Batch 1 and 2, I really love those two. This one has that orange oil aspect that those had. I just think that's an old MGP bourbon characteristic. But once you get those mixed berries, you get a little clove, a little cinnamon, a little bit of a anise or anise element going on as well. So that's kind of a licorice. But to me, it's not like a black licorice. It's more of like a red licorice element. Chocolatey, kind of cocoa powder. Leather in there as well, and a pretty resinous oak. It's very, very rich on that back. Ooh, okay, great nose. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't even nose as if it's 112 proof. Kind of run it over my palate because that's the first sip. Don't want to judge it. Just wow, very, very tasty. Ooh, okay. Yeah, medium high viscosity. That sorghum molasses element is definitely up front. Brown sugar, it feels like a brown sugar sweetness, but it could just be the Pineau Des Charentes cask helping those feel a little sweeter, because typically, again, sorghum and molasses don't have a lot of sugar to them. So the Pinot's just helping them feel sweet. That mixed berries is definitely there. It's kind of a little more raspberry than anything. Definitely not cherry driven like a lot of bourbons are nowadays. This one is raspberry, and again, they are reduced down, so they're simmered down. It feels like they're stewed a little bit. Orange oil is definitely in there. The clove and the cinnamon is definitely there. More clove than cinnamon here. A little bit of that licorice joining those, but it's actually the third place of those three. Chocolate, cocoa powder on that back end. As soon as you get past those, and the cocoa powder and chocolate are immediately joined by oak, and it's kind of a sweet oak. When those are running together, there's the leather. Way back here in the back end, you get that leather. You can start focusing on the leather. And the tobacco is way back in the back. Let me run through it one more time, see, make sure I'm not missing anybody. I love how I think the cask is helping the viscosity as well, because it kind of enters, and on the palate initially it feels like it's going to be really sweet, but it's not, because as it enters and it goes down, then you're just flooded with all those flavors. Again, raspberries, mixed berries stewed down, a little orange oil, clove, cinnamon, a little bit of licorice underneath that. Oak starts coming up here on the mid palate, joined by a fudgy dark chocolate. But I think it's being bolstered just a little bit into almost like the cocoa powder is being bolstered almost into that fudgy element. I think it's the Pinot cask that's kind of running underneath everybody, kind of giving everybody a little sweetness, a little lift. Again, it's making that cocoa powder, that dark chocolate feel a little sweet, like a little milk. But then the oak is so, again, resinous. It's very sweet oak. But this isn't, the thing that I think that she was concerned about was it becoming too sweet from that cask. Definitely didn't happen. I just think it's a beautiful representation of what that cask can do when monitored correctly. Because again, you're kind of giving everybody a little, that needs a lift without it becoming too sweet or artificial feeling. I know some of the new bourbons I've been tasting are just cloyingly sweet, and it's like, what are y'all doing? Something is changing this, you know, and it makes it feel fake. That definitely does not come through here. But it so helps the viscosity, and it helps this bourbon all the way to the end. And the thing that I love about this finish is, again, you get that typical old 20-year-old bourbon leather tobacco type element way back there in the back. Even a little cedar here. Now I'm picking up a little cedar element. So it's kind of a cedar and oak after the mid palate. Cedar kind of drops out, I think, and then here we are with the leather and a little bit of tobacco with the cocoa powder. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful whiskey. Hey, cheers to them. They did a great job again on this one. If you happen to see it, I think $150 is actually a pretty good deal on this bourbon, because considering you could spend that on some of these allocated bourbons that are not going to be this good. Again, whenever Nancy Fraley's on this, usually you're pretty safe because she has a very, very good nose and palate. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them in the comment section here in this YouTube video. Or you can always catch me on Facebook at my Liquorhound page, and every now and then on Twitter and Instagram, again, at Liquorhound. So thank y'all for watching. Everybody have a great evening, and cheers.